You're watching Capital Connection from the Illinois State
Welcome
Capitol.
back. Joining us now is the lead Senate Democrat budgeteer, LG Sims, who's here to break down the budget deal. Senator, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Cole. It's always a pleasure to be with you.
So I wanted to have you on now because we really saw it. We heard from the get-go, from the beginning of the spring and even before then, this was going to be a difficult budget year, and it really seemed to pan out that way. You guys worked through Memorial Day weekend. It took a while to really see that budget deal and then the revenue deal, everything kind of come together at the end there. Was it just, proof of concept from the very beginning, everything you guys were expecting to be difficult was difficult, or were there some additional wrenches getting thrown in here?
Every budget has its own heartbeat and its own identity, and this was no different. As we started off this year, we knew there would be some challenges. We knew that there were changes in our economic conditions. We knew we were going to have to recognize those. But we still wanted to make sure that we passed a budget that was balanced, that was responsible, that was compassionate, but that was also forward thinking. And we achieved that goal. And I'm very proud of the work that we did. Were there some hiccups along the way? Of course. But again, every budget has its own identity and heartbeat. And you're going to see those in each one.
I had House Republican leader Tony McCombie on last week, and she sort of talked about how she was disappointed to see the House lose control of the budget. Obviously, everything started in the Senate as the Senate really passed everything and then put it in the House's court and went home at the end of the spring session. And I wonder what your thoughts are on that process, because we did see the Senate and it really take control at the end there and make sure everything got passed through. What went into that decision, and why should there be stock put into that claim that the Senate now controls this, or it controlled it for at least this session?
No, I don't think that classification is accurate. There was an agreement between the Senate President, the Speaker, and the Governor, and you saw, and that's one of the reasons you saw the Governor sign the budget as quickly as he did, because there was that agreement. There was that acknowledgement that this was a team effort, and we made that reality possible by passing a budget that the Senate passed the budget that the House passed without amendment and without change. So I don't believe that classification is accurate, because this is not the Senate's budget. This is not the House's budget. It's not the Governor's budget. This is budget for the state of Illinois. And I think and you saw that by the investments made in this budget, because you'll see every one of the 13 million people of the state of Illinois will see themselves reflected in this budget. And so I don't think that classification is accurate.
You said it wasn't the governor's budget, and it was not. We saw an additional, I believe the number was about $500 million more in spending over what the governor had proposed back in February. I wonder, when that gets into it, and obviously the legislature takes over negotiations after that February proposal always comes down, but in a tight budget year, what was it like, communicating with members and making sure they understood the fiscal situation while also trying to, make accommodations, get those maybe projects granted, that funding for their districts granted in this spending bill?
Let me take a moment to thank my colleagues for the work that they did across both the Senate and the House. Members really stepped up to advocate for their districts. They advocated for the things that would improve the quality of lives for all the people of the state of Illinois. And that's really what happens. As you mentioned, when the process starts, and the session really starts when the governor proposes the budget. But that's not the end, because once that happens, the proposal then turns over to the legislature, and the legislature puts its imprint on it. And that's why I say it's not the governor's budget, nor is it the Senate or the House's budget, but it's the budget for the state of Illinois. Because after that process happens, members really go to work. They start to advocate on behalf of their communities, advocating on behalf of education and healthcare and public safety. And this was, and as we talked about this being a more challenging budget year, members really leaned into making a difference on behalf of their constituents. And I was really proud to see our members really step up and really advocate on behalf of their community, on behalf of their communities, and on behalf of the things that will improve the quality of their lives.
A 1.6% increase, I believe, was the number over last year's spending total. We've heard, even from Democrats, we heard from Fred Crespo on the floor of the House, concerns about the continuous increase in spending we're seeing year over year. Obviously, the number that gets thrown around a lot is, I think it was $13 billion additional dollars spent since Governor Pritzker first took over office. But I just wonder, as somebody who's, in the trenches with the budget situation constantly, is there a time coming up that we're going to potentially need to see maybe a much smaller increase in spending, if any increases in spending at all? We know we heard about potential cuts coming this year, but it obviously didn't really amount to much in this go around.
Well, Cole, I disagree. I mean, I think there were cuts. There were significant cuts in this year's budget to recognize that there are efficiencies that could be made. There was the across the board cuts, and talking about across the board cuts, that's a great talking point, but it's not reality, because when you do across the board cuts, those are really that's taking a hatchet when really a scalpel is needed. And if you're going to do an across the board cuts, let's say if you did 5% across the board, that means you're going to cut EBF, the education funding formula, by about $17 million. You're going to cut the home services program for needy seniors for about $9 million. You're cutting the CCP program about $8 million, and the direct and the DD providers about $6 million. So, but what we did was we went in and we adjusted liabilities where liabilities looked too high. We adjusted in areas where spending had not been utilized. So there were about $75 million in cuts that were built into this budget to recognize those efficiencies. So the talking point that across the board cuts should be made, that's not appropriate budget making. When you want to make cuts, you are making cuts with a scalpel. You want to be precise. You don't want to just do something for the sake of doing it. You want to make sure you're doing the right things. And that's what this budget represented. You saw us in this budget. We took those efficiencies and we made those difficult choices, and we used that scalpel to make those cuts. And that was really appropriate action to take.
With all those efficiencies being included, though, there were still tax increases that were mostly on large businesses, sports books, large retailers. We saw these tax increases, and I think it would be, it shouldn't be surprising that Illinois was going back to that sports betting tax, the revenue tax there, 15%, much lower than we've seen other states put in since Illinois legalized this. The jump there, I don't think was that surprising, but I guess my question is, we've kind of heard this as well. Was it too soon to go to something like that, given any potential future liabilities or spending pressures the state may have? I guess what do you think of the argument that maybe the state went back to that well too soon?
No, I don't think that's the case. I mean, we've had a graduated income tax or a graduated tax structure in place for our casinos and riverboat casinos for years. So we really just matched that structure to sports betting. So it wasn't a foreign concept to us. But this is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and it would seem to be consistent with existing policy to put those changes in place to recognize that there are the different sizes of the different operators. And again, that's really is no different than what we have done with casinos. So now you have the same kind of structure for the sports betting industry. Again, what you also saw, there was not an increased tax burden on everyday Illinoisans. What you saw was tax relief for everyday Illinoisans, a child tax credit, so that you have individuals who are working hard, who are working poor, who need the assistance. They're going to have it as a result of this budget. You'll see, when folks go to the grocery store, they're going to see the grocery tax be eliminated, because as inflation happens, we now have the ability to have those taxes be reduced when you go to the grocery store. You're going to see a continuation of the increased standard deduction. so that individual taxpayers have they are benefiting from the actions we take, not being harmed. You know, what you saw in this budget and the tax and the revenue proposals as part of this budget was not a burden, an increased burden on everyday Illinoisans, but it changes it and recognizes the tax structure that we have, but it also makes sure that it recognizes and creates the ability for us to be successful for the future. And that's really what I'm very, very proud of that work.
All right, well, Senator L.G. Sims, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Cole. Appreciate you, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
We'll be right back.